Welcome everyone to another episode of Maybe Next Year, a podcast that will have a. Sorry, we can't do this press conference now. We have to go. Sorry, everyone. Bye. My name's Frank.
I'm Paul.
I'm Scott.
That was perfect. That was still less awkward than that press conference.
It really was. It's been about 55. The fans weren't here for the first 55 minutes of just dead air that we recorded. I think I'll go back and delete that. But good news is the podcast is almost over because it's just a 2-minute podcast. We have lots of stuff to talk about in Bills Nation. Bills Nation? Bills
Nation. I think that
maybe
works.
Nexistan? Maybe next Yearistan?
Maybe Nexarization. I don't know. I assume we have to go with the former Soviet Republic.
Mafia land. Yeah, that would be nice. Yeah. The gangland state of Bill's Mafia.
Right. It's just all run by the mob now. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about like at least 2, if not 3 retirements. Another person that was let go. Quarterbacks moving. Cats and dogs living together. Escape the room. We'll see. But we're going to start with what was probably the most startling story and certainly the strangest story of the last 2 weeks, which of course was the Eric Wood retirement. You're going to be hearing this on Friday, which is when I post it. But a week ago, Friday, there was a weird tweet about a Bills player from a fantasy football scout, XM Sirius radio station, about a Bills player who was going to have to retire due to an injury. And there was going to be a press conference on Monday, and the people on the radio were like, "This is weird," and they started doing their stuff. And as more and more people confirmed things, it came out that this was true. And then ultimately, by the middle of the day, Eric Wood was revealed to be the person. And then he said we'd hear more on Monday at his press conference. And it was very sad. It was due to a neck injury. I saw you guys on Saturday, and we talked about it a little. I think the consensus was we were pretty happy that he's walking away from it.
Yep.
So there's that part of it. And then the second part of it, which is the incredibly awkward press conference that started late, and then ultimately Eric Wood took no questions and spoke for 2 minutes. This in the face of tons of Bills alumni being there, including Ryan Fitzpatrick and people who are no longer associated with the team. So the feeling was that this was supposed to be a big send-off that sort of got shortchanged or cut short for some reason, almost certainly to do with contract. But I have talked enough. Let me start with Scott. Scott, first of all, your thoughts on Eric Wood retiring to the extent that you have any, and then speculation or understanding with regards to the strange way it played out on Monday.
So, obviously, any plane crash you can walk away from is a good plane crash. Any football career that you can kind of walk away from is kind of a good career at this point. Mm-hmm. Though obviously we'll all find out more about CTE and everything else with all of the current players and how much time we've spent encouraging young men to get their brains knocked in, and how we'll feel about that a couple years from now. But in the absence of that, I think Eric's made enough money, so I think he should be set for life at this point, and his family should probably be set if they have a good financial advisor, which I hope they do. So in that sense, I'm not terribly concerned. I think the one thing that bothers me about this that I discussed with Frank on Saturday was the idea that this was basically found in a postseason kind of physical. Like they were, they brought him in for a workup, and then they're like, "Oh, your neck is not going to work anymore, and you can't play football." And it's kind of like, I guess, this is some of my ignorance of knowing how the NFL works during the season, but it seems like that would be a thing that is unlikely to arise out of nowhere without any other symptoms. And it would also seem to be unlikely that literally, it wasn't like it was, if you assuming they did a physical before training camp started, let's say, that would have been, mid-July. So it literally would have been, about 6 months ago that they cleared him to play. So I have some questions about exactly what could have happened in the course of that 6 months. Now, admittedly, a football season is one of the most traumatic things you could do to your neck, probably, in the course of a 6-month time period. But this isn't his first football season. This is obviously his 10th or whatever it is. So I think I have some questions about exactly what the medical staff was doing and or looking at, and how are.
Scott sounds like he dipped out for a second. We'll see if his volume.
The last 2 or 3 weeks before the season ended, and
right.
So they had missed something. So I understand that everyone's human here, but there needs to be multiple. There needs to be there's a process in place so that I think one single human error should not lead to someone going on the field with a chance to get paralysis or something. I'm not saying that's what happened, but clearly there's some gaps here.
Right now, I like to be a source of dissension, so I'll be a source of dissension on this. There was a good article I read in the San Diego Union Tribune from a sports medical analyst who said, in its title, if you want to check it out sometime, the bad news is actually good news for Eric Wood. And he mentioned, one of the most important functions of a team physician is to perform exit physicals, which is where Wood's issue is discovered. The busiest time of year for all team medical staffs is when the season is over, and that's when the exit physicals are performed and nagging injuries are cared for. And he talks about how players don't even want to report injuries sometimes during the season because they can deal with the pain, and that's why the injury reports are somewhat of a joke in the league right now, and that the players don't complain much. But I guess the goal of the exit physical from this article, which I hadn't really known much about beforehand, the goal is to identify all problems and get players healthy to prevent further injuries. So apparently the Bills did a good job of doing that on as Wood was exiting. But Scott also brings up, because I don't like to upset Scott, so I do want to acknowledge.
How dare you, sir?
I know. His valid point is, if there is a neck injury or head injury and it's a nagging one, I feel that yields a little more concern than if it were a nagging toe injury or shoulder injury or things that aren't going to be life-altering if it gets re-aggravated on the field. For the most part, don't get me wrong, if you break a leg, you're probably screwed for your life if it's broken in a certain way. So, I was happy they caught it. Frank had brought up a good point on especially before we knew the severity, brought up a good point on Twitter, like, hey, let's not just be talking about the money aspect of this because, hey, this is a human being. We want to make sure he's okay. The good news is, by all accounts, is that he is okay. So we will, at some point down the road, discuss the money on it. And he's, obviously he's not officially retired yet because they're still sorting out the salary situation. And but Eric he was a fine job. He was an above average center for this organization, above average guard for a while at the beginning of his career. He got to see them through the playoffs, a great offensive leader, continuously voted team captain throughout the year. So he's going to be missed. And then the question is, who's going to step in and, help when take that role? Is it going to be Groy? Is it going to be a draft pick? Is it going to be a free agent? So many ways this could go.
Yeah, I think that that's the purpose of this press conference, which is a bit disappointing, or the reason it fell apart was the between the Players Association and the front office sort of realizing how the money works on the books, that he wasn't allowed to retire then. And I don't know if it's, and certainly there was some speculation that, to ensure that the Bills didn't try and take his money away, some of his signing bonus away, because it was a football related injury, which would have been different if he had hurt himself a different way. He, after all, hasn't played a snap of that extension yet. And so there would have been some pause possibly for the Bills to ask for some of his money back. And then maybe even, deny him some of the injury money. I don't think that they want to do all that. I do believe that what they hope to do is release him after the league year starts, and that sort of pushes some of the dead money to next year instead of right this minute. So I think that's what that was. The disappointing part was he found out an hour before his kid was born. That's what he said. So that gave them at least, 10, 11, 12 days to sort of figure out how to do this, and what could be said and what couldn't be said. And it seems like poor planning on everybody's part if at the last minute they realized that this was not going to be a good way to do it. The other thing is, if you take him at his word, he didn't have these injuries at the beginning of the year. He didn't look like he had these injuries after the 2 stingers in back-to-back weeks, and it was only in this exit interview. Now, maybe that's not true. maybe there is maybe he's covering for the Bills or himself a bit in regards to he was playing knowing he had some sort of injury. But, if you take that and it's just something about where the spine has moved, kind of like Aaron Williams' injury, which we'll talk about in a minute, that the spine simply where it is cannot safely absorb another shock and be guaranteed to not, set off those nerves. I'm not doctor enough to know that. I think Scott's right to be a little skeptical about how it came down, but I at least am going to take him at his word with regards to that he certainly didn't understand the severity of something before it happened. The other thing I said Saturday night when we were all together was that in a weird way, I guess I'm happy that I don't want to say I'm happy they lost the game against Jacksonville, but if they win the game against Jacksonville and keep playing, I mean, it's another spin of the chamber before you pull the trigger with his neck, it sounds like. And we could have been watching Eric Wood get carted off the field. I mean, the way they've made it sound like, he was one bad hit away from, I guess they all are, but he was perhaps even more so one bad hit away from, not walking or being in a life-threatening situation. So, the silver lining, I suppose, is the way we could cast it with regards to Eric and his injury. Do we have other thoughts on that, or should we move on to yesterday's surprise and not surprise retirement, but surprise that it happened and he came to Buffalo to discuss it?
Yeah, that was a great letter. I thought that I don't know if anyone's had a chance to read the
Yes.
Players Tribune letter. Okay, good.
Just to set the stage for you, Aaron Williams, former defensive back for the Buffalo Bills, who stopped playing last year after he was hit again. I mean, he'd been taken off the field, as he said, 4 different times in his football career, but had been taken off the field the year before, and then last year again when Jarvis Landry kind of lit him up, which he talks about in the field. So he retired. He basically had discussions with teams other than the Bills, who, upon looking at his neck, basically said, "We're not going to put you on the field. You're not cleared to play football," for a very similar reason. The nerves. I heard an interview with him on the radio yesterday, and basically the between the vertebrae of your spine is a little bit of wiggle room for your nerves, and the way it sits, it just would not take very much for them to snap or cut or pinch and really do lasting permanent damage to his body. So he's done with playing football. He said he wants to, plenty of life left. He'd like to eventually get back and do something with football. But Paul, it sounds like you read that letter too. So why don't you give me your thoughts on it? And
I did. And one of the first things that stood out to me, and I know other people have mentioned this already, is it is extremely hard for someone to come out and admit when they weren't fully focused, when, to just point out their flaws, and to do so in an open letter when he talks about his first 2 years with the Bills. And we all remember his first 2 years with the Bills and how mediocre he was, playing mainly cornerback, though he was thrown at safety a bit. He was being defensive on Twitter, and he wasn't really doing much. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it seemed, he became this big, reliable player. They gave him an extension after he'd served his time, and really just, was a guy that seemed to be respected around the locker room for Buffalo, and who did a really solid job on the field. So what stood out to me most about that article at first was him coming out and saying, "Hey, Bills Mafia, I didn't give it my all those first 2 years." That is not easy to come out and say that, "Hey, I sold you guys short and I'm sorry." And he indicates a level of regret, I remember, about the fact that his career was only so short. Now he ended up being so short, and he feels like those were in some sense wasted years. But also, he was grateful for the opportunity. He was very thankful to Buffalo and the fans. And of course, we love that, but we love it because he didn't need to be either. It's not like he was just reciting the same old lines, like "they will always have a special place in my heart." Like, he went into specifics and going out with Fred Jackson, and Fred introducing him to the city, and him becoming more focused and a much better ball player. And it really is a shame that Aaron Williams' career was cut short. I thought when he got moved to safety and when he started to focus, he was one of the better safeties in the league. Thankfully for the Bills, they got 2 good safeties in Hyde and Poyer. But, regardless, you don't want to see Aaron Williams' career end the way it did. Kudos to him for having such a positive attitude about it. Similar situation to Eric Wood. We're glad he's off the field before anything life-altering could have happened to him. So, even though he was no longer part of the Bills organization officially since they cut him before the end of before the beginning of last season, he was most recently part of the organization. And, best of luck to him and kudos to him for looking in the mirror, being honest with himself, and then being honest with everyone else about his career.
Yeah. I mean, I think Aaron, I think reading the article, and I was kind of reading it a bit as Paul was talking, I think it's sad that it didn't work out, obviously. I mean, he's not the first guy this has happened to, obviously. Not the first by far. I mean, Kevin Everett or, other guys who, that was just another, head neck injury, but there have been plenty of other guys, James Hardy, had injury problems. He was ineffective at problems too, but then obviously he had his life ended later on. I feel like last year ago we were talking about that. It's sad to kind of see the promise of just young men in general, regardless of our own, we know these guys because they're Bills, and we've debated about them and we talked about them and we treat them like they're, players in a video game to a certain extent, or people we watch on the TV, but it's not, it's when you get down to what happens after the game that you start having to deal with the fact that they are humans and that they're more than just the gladiators on the field to a certain extent. So, I'm glad that he's getting out while he is, like we've been saying. I guess that the last, the only thing I'll say is, he's always welcome back. At least I think that's the same thing with him and Eric both is, I hope that they feel like I hope that the Bills keep the door open to them. Obviously there are levels of that. There's like the Jim Kelly level, which is like Jim gets to do whatever he wants because he's Jim Kelly. And I don't think Aaron Williams gets the Jim Kelly treatment, but I also think that there's still, a place for him, on alumni days and, various kind of things. I don't think that there's going to be people who are going to look back at Aaron Williams's career and think of it anything other than fondly. I mean, those first two seasons, it was frustrating because he, and to be fair, I think we were playing out of position those first couple of 2 years. Like he was a much better safety. I think he was built better for that than he was a corner anyway. I mean, maybe it would have been different if he was taking it more seriously, but I think that was part of the problem with him earlier on. So, right. I think, I thought he was a really good player for us. And I think it was that's not the only reason. That's, that's ultimately probably a small reason why this is a shame. But again, it's not that big of a shame because he's still walking away. So,
we need to set the settings to no injuries for the season. I feel like we should be adjusting this game of Madden. Because
it's exactly. Where's that setting on our?
It's kind of it's really interesting to me too because the Bills during the year were one of the luckiest teams, if you will, in terms of not having a lot of man time lost to injuries. But how funny when the season ends, you lose a former Pro Bowl center and then a guy, even though again no longer with the organization but a quality safety, having to retire because of an injury as well.
Paul, I think you zooled a bit at the end there.
You may have zooled a tiny bit at the end.
All right, I should have tweet it. So I'm gonna log off.
You broke your own rule. Yeah. All right. I'll ask this question to you, Scott, because it's really just doubling back on Eric Wood. Do you know if there's a reason why they couldn't have just kept him on the roster, put him on IR for 2 years, and he could have collected his money, and it was money they had already planned on spending, and so it wouldn't have really changed any of the cap stuff, other than I guess it's probably a bit of a pain in the ass for Eric, who might want the lump sum all front, but. Can you think of a reason why?
I think it would be an NFLPA issue. I think it would be one of those things where it was collectively bargained that you can't do that, or that if you're a player and you want to retire, you get to retire when you want and get your money when you want, and you don't have to sit on IR. So I think that's how they would probably, like, even if Eric Wood wanted to do that and the Bills wanted to do that, the NFLPA may say, like, there's a reason we don't have this. It's for the good of our union, and I could see it being that way. Don't you think?
Yeah, I definitely could see it being that way. It just when they were talking about it, and I realized that like this cap money was going to get accelerated, I thought, well, is it really any different for Eric Wood if he just gets his paychecks over the next couple of years but doesn't have to do anything? And they just and by the time you put him on IR, then you're not even eating up a roster spot. He just sort of has to show up probably and take a test and say, yeah, you're not cleared for football. So but it's not ultimately an issue that we need to address. I'm going to skip down quickly and then come back to the quarterbacks. But I'd also like to point out that Gil Bird was let go by the Bills, the defensive backs coach, in possibly an effort only to hire John Butler, who, from what I understand, is a friend of Coach McDermott's. So there's that. And then Mike Waffle retired, who was only with the Bills for 1 year, but was a 20-year veteran of the league as an assistant coach. And a player before that. He was on a Super Bowl winning team. He was with one of the Giants teams that beat the Patriots. I don't know much about Mike Waffle, and I honestly don't know much about Gil Bird other than I liked how the defensive backs played last year.
I know he was great in Tecmo Super Bowl as a cornerback for the Chargers. One of the people that would make the Chargers a team that was not all that good. He could hand the ball to butts on offense. You had rookie Junior Seau on defense, Leslie O'Neal. You had Gil Bird. You could win some games with them. He was also Jairus Bird's father, for those of you who remember that factoid. So, that was but yeah, it's a lot of people were a bit up in arms saying, boy, they did so well in the secondary last year. That was really the strength of the defense. Why would they let go of this guy? But maybe, for all we know, maybe they did well in spite of Gil Bird. You got to give some trusting of the process, as they say. He knows what he's doing.
I've heard that before.
I should trademark that before anyone else thinks of it.
Interesting.
It does. I'm just gonna say it does seem like the trust, like the 100. Like we have to evaluate everybody and yada yada yada. It's like, yeah, that's all true until like there's a guy who I used to know and work with, and then we'll figure out a way around it. Like it seems like when it comes to like Mike Tolbert or like some of these other guys who are like McDermott's buddies, like it seems like the rules get bent a little bit. Now again, we made the playoffs this year, so there's maybe an argument for he knows what kind of players he needs to win, but that again, like that logic will fall away like all of the others do when you don't start winning. So, or when things go bad.
The Texans secondary was under Butler was less than impressive in 2017. Buffalo Rumblings writes. They ranked 24th. Now, perhaps they didn't have the talent, but they both went to LaSalle College High School in Pennsylvania together. And to some extent, like, what's the DB's coach doing other than getting guys prepared? And how much is it really fair to, grade his performance on specifically how well the DBs rank as opposed to that being a function of the defense overall? So, if McDermott thinks he can get this guy to coach in his defense, then it's all on McDermott's shoulders anyway. So to my mind, I don't want to get too worked up about that.
And the name John Butler carries some good connotations in Buffalo. Did some good work. Different guy coming back from the dead and being a defensive
relation as far as we know.
Yeah. Although I have to say, one time I heard John Butler on the radio in Rochester shortly after 9/11. You know what? I'm not going to say this because it might not have been John Butler. No, you know what? It wasn't John Butler. Never mind. And I'm not.
You're about to make him like a truther, and then you're like, nope, you're wrong guy.
Even a little worse than that. And what I heard, and it was an ex-Bills player, and I remember now that it wasn't John Butler, so I'm going to let that go. But we're going to move on before I say something terrible about an ex-Bill. We're going to go to the first domino, the first clue, the first. If this was Escape the Room, this is the sequence on the briefcase that you have to translate into the unlock code. This is the first little bit. The first chess piece comes out to be put on the board. And Alex Smith, quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs, was not traded to. There is an agreement to trade him in place the moment the league year starts to the Washington Football Club, who will then extend his contract to $70 million in 4 years. Remarkable, obviously, deal. He's a 34-year-old quarterback who's done very well overall. I think it's hard to say he's a bad quarterback. He's certainly, he is I would say he's either at the bottom tier of very good quarterbacks or the highest possible good but not very good quarterback. He is almost one of those defining lines type quarterbacks, almost like we have here in Tyrod Taylor, where like he just seems to be sitting on this line where no one can agree whether he should be in.
He's an Alex Smith type quarterback.
Alex Smith is an Alex Smith.
He is the prototypical Alex Smith type.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, I feel strongly about
right.
that.
Well, and the thing is, and then we're talking about quarterbacks that sort of, are they more Alex Smith or more Joe Flacco? And you're like, well, anyway, the point is he's going to Washington, which means that we're going to see Pat Mahomes next year, and we're going to find out real quick whether we should have taken Pat Mahomes or not with the 10th overall pick, like we could have. 2, it's a team that was almost certainly going to need a quarterback in Washington, who is parting ways with Kirk Cousins, now has a quarterback that's drafting ahead of the Bills. So that's one less team taking a quarterback ahead of the Bills. And 3, it accelerates Kirk Cousins is available to be traded. He doesn't have to be traded for, but we'll talk about it in a minute. There's speculation that the Redskins are going to try and force him to be traded to get some value before he leaves. But the point is, one team no longer needs a quarterback. One big quarterback that was clearly on the market is no longer available. And the next big quarterback to come down is I feel like either a done deal and we don't know about it, or days away from being a done deal and we will know about it. But let me start with Scott and his thoughts, because obviously Scott and I have gone back and forth quite a bit on quarterback this year. First of all, thoughts on him going to DC, thoughts on whether he should have gone to the Bills, however you want to view this news, which I think is important for the Buffalo Bills. How do you want to talk about this? I'll give you free reign.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it is a lot to cover. I mean, I think 4 years, $70 million is the interesting part of this to me.
Yeah.
Because that is a number of $1 million per year. I'm going to say like $17 million a year, roughly. And what is Tyrod getting paid next year? 18?
Yeah, I'll pull that up.
18 million. I'll check over the cap. And then after I Zool, I'll then log off. After I do this.
Exactly.
The
cap hit might be 18. I forget exactly what the
his cap number is 18 even. He's going to get his salary will actually be right about that too. His base is 10, his prorated will be 2, and his roster bonus will be 6. So he'd be 18 cap number and 18 actual money.
And then is that it, or is that the team option after that?
Then it's all in red, so I think it all becomes is red.
Right. Then it's the team option. He is officially not under contract for 2019 at this point. Excuse me, no, it's under contract to 2019 for for 2.083 million, but that's not going to happen either. It's going to be a lot more or a lot less.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's so I think that I think I draw the comparison there to make it clear, like what we're talking about here. Like if you want a mediocre quarterback in this league, which I'm going to put Alex Smith in the mediocre quarterback category. Like,
okay.
I don't feel like he's anything particularly special. I feel like, I don't want to get into the Kaepernick thing about why he's not in the league, but right. Alex Smith, like, he played on some decent teams, but those teams were decent anyway. Like the Chiefs teams that have been making the playoffs the last couple of years were pretty good teams overall. They had good defenses. They had some weapons around Alex Smith to make them work, and they had Andy Reid, who was a pretty decent coach. I'm not going to I don't want to say that Tyrod would definitely work as well in that system because it's a different system, but I'm not convinced that Alex is that much better than Tyrod. And so to a certain extent, what that means to me is that's where your market is for a mediocre quarterback. And so if you wanted your veteran guy, that was to a certain extent it. I mean, I think there are obviously other options that are going to be out there who are not as kind of commit, or I want to say experienced. If Bortles hits the market for some reason, or if there's kind of other names kind of floating, your McCowns of the world, or if they are experienced, they're not very good, which is like the McCowns of the world. So to me, I think this further speaks to the idea of Tyrod as a bridge. I don't know that it's necessarily. I don't think it necessarily closes the door on us still taking a quarterback with a high pick either way. But I'd also say that I'm not convinced that Kirk Cousins is worth breaking the bank over, especially given the Bills cap situation. And that's all I'll say about that.
Well, that's all you say about it for now, but I'm going to ask you specifically in a minute more about Kirk Cousins.
All right. Why don't you hear your thoughts then?
That's right. Yeah. Let's do Paul's thoughts on Alex Smith.
Yeah, no problem. Alex is, I think, Scott already covered kind of the salary situation as far as what you pay for mediocre quarterback, etc. So I won't recap that. What I will do is, Alex Smith is certainly a quarterback who can win you games. He is, he's a good player, but you do not break the bank for a guy who's 33 years old and, you're looking to, build a future with. The Bills have stressed throughout the importance of building a team that can win both today and tomorrow. And Alex Smith can help you win today, but he's not really going to be around tomorrow. And that puts off even further the time that you're going to be developing a quarterback. So I am glad Alex Smith is off the table. He is at best, as we've discussed, a temporary solution. So that makes me very happy that the Bills have, just are out of the running for Alex Smith by virtue of the fact that he'll be going to Washington at some point in mid-March once the league year is official. And Frank will ask about Cousins, so I won't even talk about Cousins.
Yeah, well, I want to offer my thoughts on Alex Smith.
Sorry.
I think
How far away from my microphone did I wander exactly there?
It sounded like you fell down a well for a bit.
It did sound like, or you had gone to open your safe, and
I am.
Well, we can hear you. It was fine. I just, we prefer you not speaking on the tin can.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm a little confused about Alex Smith in particular with Washington because I feel like Kirk Cousins is probably also an Alex Smith who's 4 years younger, and they could have offered him this type of money a year or two ago, and he would have happily signed it. And so, to me,
the Redskins are stupid.
They are stupid, and I'm so thankful they're stupid. One of my thoughts was that I'm really happy that they continue to fall on grenades for the NFL because you can count on them to frankly sign Bruce Smith way past his prime and throw a ton of money.
Did they do that? That seems like more than a hypothetical there.
Yeah, right. And they threw tons and tons of money.
Deion Sanders as well, I think, was on that list. They signed Deion at the end of his career.
Yeah. No, they have a history of doing this, and you would just think that they would have learned their lesson. And in a way, thank God they didn't, because Buffalo could have had Alex Smith, and I would have been frustrated with Alex Smith because I think I'm with Scott that he's closer to mediocre than good. And even if I didn't think that, even if I thought he was good, I certainly don't expect 37-year-old Alex Smith to be good instead of mediocre. He's on the tail end of this career. So I don't really understand what Washington's play here is. The other thing about Kirk Cousins is he stands to make a lot of money. But the team, from what I heard this morning in an interview, was they have the impression that they're going to there's a risky gambit where they can threaten Kirk Cousins and basically say, look, we'll sign your franchise tag again if you don't, go find what team you want to play with, and they need to give us something back because they're not going to get any compensation when he walks, or it'll be minimal. And so the idea is they could work out a trade beforehand, and then he could sign with that team, and instead of running the risk of being stuck on the Redskins roster and not playing on a team where he doesn't, clearly is persona non grata. I think that he's a better quarterback than Washington has treated him like. I think if they didn't think he was the guy, they should have walked away from him before this. But this would be like franchising Tyrod Taylor this year. It really would be sort of like, to put it in a Bills context, yes. Right. It would be like, we don't want you, but we have nothing better to do, so we're just going to force you to stay here. At least Buffalo, in a way, had the courtesy to let him walk and test the market last year, Taylor. And it turned out that, the Bills were closer to right on what he was worth than what Tyrod thought he was right. Anyway, so but at the same token, Kirk Cousins will throw the football. He's certainly a different quarterback than Tyrod Taylor in a lot of ways. I don't know that he has the leadership, or not the leadership. You know what? I think if anything, I would believe he would be a good locker room leader. He seems like a really good upfront guy.
Like that?
Yeah, you like that? And I think that there are people who would attest to the fact that he's sort of a character player. He certainly would fit that end of the Bills, desire at the position. But I don't know that his host of problems is any better than Taylor's host of problems or Alex Smith's host of problems. They're different problems, but they're not necessarily better. The other thing is, it's hard to say with him because they didn't have a lot of talent in Washington this year, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. They're a cruddy football team, and they've been a cruddy football team for a while.
He didn't even throw to Terrell Pryor for some reason. Like, Pryor was pretty decent.
Terrell used to be a quarterback. Pryor. Yeah,
he caught 1,000 yards. He had 1,000 yards last year in Cleveland. They didn't throw to him this year.
I know. I don't know. It's
Cousins. I mean, Cousins has flaws in his game. Like he's better than Alex Smith, and he's younger, so at least you're getting more years out of it if you sign him. Mm-hmm. But he's still, I'm not convinced that he's. I mean, again, is he a guy like a Flacco? Sure, he can. If everything else is right, he can get you there. But I don't think he's certainly not at the Brady, Rodgers, Breeze level, and I don't think no one should think that. No one should pay him like he is.
Right.
They're going to. Someone's going to.
I think that's some of just the market, right?
If you
are one of these teams, and the problem is you've got Denver, you've got Buffalo, you've got the Jets, who I think they all said were teams that A, have the cap room, and B, the need for quarterback. And the worry is that if you're Buffalo, the other two teams are way up on the draft board and could, in fact, just take a young quarterback cheaply. Now, a team like Denver might say, well, we have a good defense and we've had a good defense, and we don't want to wait to develop a quarterback. We want a quarterback that can do these things because we think we can put the right pieces around him. So you would hope that happens, because then, again, another team ahead of you on the draft board falls out. But you raised an interesting question, Scott, and maybe not dwell on it too long, but let's say Brady, Breeze, and Rodgers is the top tier, and then what would be the next? Would be Roethlisberger.
The hot take alert in the background.
Yeah,
yep. Yeah, that's it. Well, I'm going to mute for 1 second here.
I think, with the hot take alert, the Bills should draft a long snapper in the first round. So is it just Roethlisberger? I mean, that's 4. Who's in the tier right below that? Who's the guy that
I mean, Scott brought up Flacco earlier. I think you have to, he's in there. Prescott's too young. We don't know where to put him. Not Foles. Wentz, might go in that.
Wentz and Goff, right?
Tier. It's Matthew Stafford. I mean, that's a guy who's got a bunch of 4,000-yard seasons and a 5,000-yard season.
Highest paid player in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think,
there's. I think those guys are kind of in there. Yeah, guys who kind of can do it. If the guys, if you have 80% of the, Brady can win with 50% of an NFL team around him.
Right.
Breeze and Rodgers can do it with 60% of a team around him. And the next guys can do it, I think you put Matt Ryan in there. I feel like Matt Ryan.
Oh yeah, Matt Ryan, he was MVP last year. So yeah.
Kind of in that top tier. And then I don't know, part of me wants to put Russell Wilson in there, not just because I'm a huge Russell Wilson homer, but he won with some pretty not a lot of talent at offensive line or wide receiver for many years. Admittedly, with a good defense, so that's part of it. But I feel like there's enough there to. I don't know if he's still probably not in that top level.
No.
But beyond that, I think he's in that second level.
I think Phillip Rivers is probably in that second level, at least, or he's probably up there.
I think so. I haven't seen him play enough. I don't know. I've heard that he starts getting a little loose with the ball at some point.
Right.
And then there's also the young guys like the Carson Wentz and the you don't really know if he's lightning in a bottle. Yeah, Prescott.
Prescott.
Cam Newton, by the way, who we didn't even talk about. Probably in the second year. right?
Probably needs
One
to
in
be in
MVP,
the second tier,
like
yeah,
Matt Ryan,
at minimum,
right?
yeah.
You know,
So yeah, I'm comfortable putting Cousins in there, and I think Smith's at the bottom of that tier to a certain extent, right at the
okay.
next.
So all right, so is that the tier we're shooting for as Bills fans? Then, like, you want a quarterback that's in that tier? No, obviously not Alex Smith now at 34, but like,
well, see, that's the problem is that
right.
it's easy to say like, well, let's just give me
I'm
that
not saying like let's
guy.
just go to the quarterback store and get us
Yeah.
your quarterback. I'm saying if we draft one, that's what we're
I
hoping.
believe that's next to Walmart. If you go,
Right.
if you make a left.
Well,
Right.
the problem is where I mean, to a certain extent, where you're drafting them. I mean, if we trade up to get in the top 10, then they kind of have to be the first tier guy, because
Right.
that's what you're betting on. You're at that point we're mortgaging a little bit of present and future for someone who we think is gonna be the guy for 10 years. If you're back at the bottom of the first round, yeah, you're okay with a second tier guy. If you get a second tier quarterback, that's when we're kind of in this range where you
So are
don't have to
you
get as many pieces in place to get you at least into the playoffs. And then as long as in the playoffs, you hopefully get lucky and things break the right way.
so are you saying that a guy like Cam Newton, who you don't think is like a first tier quarterback, is a disappointment? He's a first overall pick.
I guess I would say, I mean, I wasn't prepared to defend myself on this
Sorry.
point
I'm not trying to attack.
What
you.
is this asking questions for us to defend our views? I've been used to for 6 years just putting my view out there unquestioned.
Obviously, I put you on the spot there, and I didn't mean to. Put you on the spot
it's fine.
It's just I'm trying to tease it out a little.
No, absolutely. Put the logic up to the light. It's an old Bart Simpson quote, which is fantastic. As long as there are absolutely no follow-up questions,
The answer is yes. Right.
Exactly.
Excuse me, could I have the telephone book for Hokkaido, Japan?
Yeah, we just did that. So what were we talking about? Cam Newton, first overall pick. Is he a disappointment?
I mean, if you're Carolina, you can't move on from him. He's obviously a better quarterback than almost anybody you could have.
So I think the problem is that he is inherently a bit of a disappointment because he didn't win the Super Bowl on his own. To a certain extent, like Brady has done that, Rodgers has sort of done that, Breeze has sort of done that, Roethlisberger sort of done that. And again, like they had some of those teams were better or worse. And unfortunately, that's how you have to judge these kind of things. Like it's not fair to Cam Newton that he's not in that because he obviously came close. I mean, the Carolina, it was New England they were in the game with, right? Is that the one he was in, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, they were in that. Wait, no, it wasn't.
No, Denver.
They played Denver. And
it was the Denver year, right? Yeah,
that's Peyton Manning's last Super Bowl.
Delhomme was the quarterback for the Panthers when they lost to the Pats in
in like 2000.
Yeah, but the most recent one, right? It was the Denver game. So and that's the thing, like, and that makes me feel better about my case is that he didn't really get anything against that defense. Now, again, that was a great defense, but again, Brady's beaten good defenses, and Rodgers and Breeze have, and I don't think Cam is it. That's the thing. I think the verdict is still out on him because Breeze didn't really win his until he was in the second half of his career. I think you could probably say. So I think he still has time. I think I'd say that. I think the verdict's out.
Okay. Let's move on. That was a very
Cam Newton's a disappointment, Frank?
No, I think he's fine, and I think if you and honestly, I think if you end up with even if in the top 10, if you end up with a quarterback that is your quarterback for 10 years, then you did pretty well. Obviously, it's better to have Breeze or Manning or Michael Vick or guys that really you can hang your hat on being good quarterback. Vick, of course, not quite the other guys, but Donovan McNabb, like those are all guys who were franchise quarterbacks. And I think if you end up with a franchise quarterback, even if they don't win the Super Bowl, you did about as best as you could. And so for me, if I come away from a top 10 pick with not an Alex Smith, but if I come away with I see that's not fair. I guess what I'm saying is like, you'd have to do better. I feel like I'd want to do better than Alex Smith in the top 10, but not by much better, like a little better. Uh,
But we haven't even brought up like a Marcus Mariota type. I think that would fall in the Dak Prescott category. It's still too young to tell, but could be.
yeah. Although Mariota is getting to be like I think we kind of know who he is almost now.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah,
I
but
mean,
like
it's hard to judge the younger guys, but
like
I get
Eli
your point. I get your point, Frank. I mean, I think we can get into the metaphorical question of what is success for an NFL team.
Right.
Is it
I think
winning the Super Bowl? Is it being consistently in contention? Is it
I think you have to come away with it and
making
say
money, whatever.
If you can come away from the draft saying, yeah, there was no more than 3 guys in the rest of the league that I would have taken instead of my quarterback. Like if you have Breeze, maybe you'd prefer Brady, but not by much. And really not many other people. Like you look at that and you say, Drew Brees is great, and he's not the reason we're not winning Super Bowls,
Yeah.
So, and Eli Manning, like he's not the quarterback that some of these other guys are, but he's a good quarterback. He was a good quarterback for a long time, and he certainly was capable and won Super Bowl. So if you come away with a guy like that, that's what you're shooting for. If you have Kelly, it's like, that class of 84.
83, but that's okay.
83. Was Kelly the best of that group? Probably not. Was Marino the best of that group? Maybe, but like,
Elway, that was just so loaded that.
Right. And if you look at any of those guys, and I think you come away from it, you never regret that you had Jim Kelly. I never once thought like I want Dan Marino instead of Jim Kelly. I thought Jim Kelly was great. He is great. And it wasn't those quarterbacks weren't the difference. It wasn't like John Elway was, far and away better than the other guys. He just was in Denver doing something else and going to Super Bowls and not winning until the end too. And they were all not equally great, but they were great in their own way. And you never felt like you had to have the other guy. Like I don't think people in Green Bay are going, fucking Tom Brady, I wish we had him. The way that people in Buffalo, maybe not on that level, but you rue the fact that you don't have a quarterback of that caliber.
I mean, but did anyone say that, Frank?
Well, we were talking about what success is, so I'm trying to say like, why I'm okay with a second tier, a guy below that first group.
Well, yeah, but then the comparison isn't between Rodgers and Brady; it's between, whoever you want to pick.
Cam Newton, Brady. Like if I have Cam Newton for the next 10 years, I'm okay. I think I did well if I end up with Cam Newton for the next 10 years.
Well, okay, but then you have to go back in time to when Cam Newton was drafted to a certain extent. Like if Brady's
what
not
I'm saying is if they move up to the top 10 and they take Baker Mayfield and he has ultimately the career that Cam Newton has up to this point, I'd say, well, he was a good quarterback. They certainly got a good quarterback.
I guess, and then the question is that if who else is coming out this year? Josh Allen from Wyoming,
right,
turns into Aaron Rodgers, you're not going to be jealous?
It would sting a little if they had the opportunity to get Josh Allen and didn't take him. But I think ultimately, if you come away with a good quarterback, you can only. It's like if you hit 5 numbers on the lottery instead of 6. Sure, like God, I wish I hit 6, but it's really hard to feel bad when you're rolling.
Yeah.
You walked away with $700,000.
All right, just to take this in a brief other direction, because I'm looking at stats on ESPN, and they have all-time best seasons for quarterback by total QBR.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to give you 9 out of the top 10, and then you tell me what's just the name missing, and I'll give you just the name.
JP Lossman.
So it's close. Brady, Manning, Rodgers, Breeze, Manning, Ryan, Brady, Romo, which I don't think anyone would have seen that one coming. Actually, the 2014 Tony Romo.
And now there's one missing.
There's one missing. What is the name? Don't go to ESPN. That's cheating.
I won't cheat. JP Lossman's close. Okay.
You're in the ballpark. You're definitely. If you want to talk about tiers, he's in that tier.
I will say,
and I will give you a hint. I will say AFC. Okay. And I will say, in the last 15 years, you know the name, and I will say it's not AFC West, and not AFC North. So it's in either the AFC East or the AFC South.
So like a Ryan Tannehill.
I'm going to go with Blake.
I go with Tannehill.
Those are okay. So you're both very close. In fact,
Curtis Painter.
So who said Bortles?
I did. Frank did.
You're closest because it is a Jacksonville quarterback.
Oh, Byron Leftwich.
No.
Oh,
David Garrard.
David Garrard.
All right.
2007, David Garrard had an 80.9 quarterback rating.
Wow.
Now, the way that ESPN did it is they have so that's the total QBR, and then he did have less plays than pretty much everybody else. He had 411 plays, and the other guys like Brady and Romo in one of their seasons had 508. So that's a solid 100 plays less to a certain extent. But he had a slightly higher run rating than some of these guys, and he only had 46.9 points added, which I guess is some sort of fancy stat. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to go back and look at David Garrard's 2007 statistics. He went 64% completion.
Oh, you quieted up for a second, Scott.
He's still quiet.
He is quiet, but he's probably talking and doesn't know that we can't hear him.
I can hear you.
Okay, there we go. Good. Okay,
I'm sorry.
No, go for it. 64% completion.
2,500 yards passing, 18 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 3 fumbles. That's enough for the 7th best season in NFL history.
By what I would say is maybe
QBR.
A flaw.
But I mean, it's
sure.
It's kind of insane that just blows my mind. Anyway, okay, we can move on. That's all I wanted to say.
LaShawn McCoy and Richie Incognito went to the Pro Bowl, and LaShawn McCoy scored a touchdown, allegedly. I didn't watch it.
I didn't watch it.
I saw the replay. I didn't watch it either. But
okay,
well, good for them. Good time. Hawaii in January.
Was it in Hawaii? I thought it was in Orlando.
It was in Orlando.
Wherever. It's still better than Buffalo in January.
Wah, wah. I don't know. I've been to Orlando. It's pretty sad.
My sister lives there. I know.
That's also in that kind of JP Lossman tier of American cities. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, you don't want to dismiss it completely. Like, it definitely could play in the league, but
but it's not. It's not in the New York, kind of Chicago,
right?
Category,
right.
Or whatever.
So Facebook and Twitter. I've got the Facebook questions up, Paul. So I'm going to read these. You can go for the Twitter questions. David, I hear some commentators suggesting Tyrod and/or Cordy Glenn in potential trades. Why would either have any trade value? Glenn has a big contract and lost a year due to injury. Tyrod would be a good backup, but his contract pays him starter money. Players with real trade value are on rookie deals like Dawkins, Zay Jones, or Trey White, and I wouldn't want to trade any of them. I certainly agree with the back half of that, David, that I wouldn't want to trade any of those players, even Zay Jones, who had a disappointing year. I think Taylor has trade value in light of Alex Smith's trade. I think you could point to him as a cheaper but very competent Alex Smith. And the trade value would be you wouldn't have to compete on the market, I suppose. I don't think you would get very much back for him, but you could think about it and try to. My guess is they won't. My guess is they'll end up cutting him precisely what you said, because he's going to make $18 million next year. Cordy Glenn has trade value because tackles always have trade value. And if they have any good year and anybody believes that they can come back from an injury, they're going to take them. That said, my guess is right now the Bills are going to hold on to line players like grim death, because they just don't, with Eric Wood gone and the likelihood that Groy is probably going to fill in for him, largely based on the fact that they just don't have the capital to go and get in. They were not planning on having to get a center too this year. My guess is that's why Glenn will stick around, but that's why he has value. Do you guys have thoughts on trading Taylor or Glenn?
I think Glenn, I think, is the more tempting option, because you get some money off your cap. You have a guy in Dawkins you feel can fill in that role, and Glenn's health is such a question. But again, I don't trade a 6th or 7th for him, because he's a guy who's shown when he's healthy, he can still be valuable to you. And same with Taylor. Taylor, I think, is going to be, I'm not going to say untradeable. No one is ever untradeable, but he becomes most tradable once, the chips have fallen in the draft and and so forth, because then, you kind of know what teams are planning to do in the quarterback position in the coming season. But by then it will be too late for the Bills to make a trade because they'll have already had to either commit to him or cut ties from him, and probably cut ties from him. So I would expect it will be difficult to trade Taylor, not impossible. We'll see what happens if some teams don't love what they see in the draft and they're after Tyrod, what the Bills could get. So I'm open to it. I just don't think it's likely to happen with either for the concerns mentioned.
I don't have too much to add to that.
Okay, Tom says without Taylor, there's $40 million in available cap space according to Spot Track. Not that much space required for re-signs as well. A run at Kirk Cousins possible? ? Absolutely. I mean, we just talked about it. I'm not entirely impressed with Kirk Cousins' career. That said, if you'd have told me Jared Goff was going to be any good this year, I might have giggled. So I don't want to go down the path of whether he's worth it or not, but $40 million is going to be enough to pick up Kirk Cousins if you think he's the right way to go. It's certainly an option sitting at 20 and 21 to get a quarterback that is, would maybe fit the McDermott model if they think he does, and then use these draft picks to get other guys that you need. It's certainly possible.
Yes, it is. It is possible. I don't know, based off of how they've said they want to build through the draft, that it's super likely.
Right.
I think they would explore it, and I'm sure if their agent has called the Bills and been like, "Hey, this is kind of what we'd be thinking about, and our guy would be really excited to come play for you, so give us a call back." And I'm not sure that they would, just based on that build through the draft kind of thing. And again, there's no I'm not aware that Sean McDermott, golfs with Kirk Cousins' father during the offseason or anything that would cause us to throw out our existing plans and break all of our rules. But we'll never know. I mean, we'll find out. We'll find out if we sign him, I guess.
Yes. Yeah, they and Bean had been through and talked about. He had said that he had looked at all the quote unquote quarterbacks that would matter, guys in the first round. So he didn't say which ones he liked, but that he had seen the quarterbacks that would basically matter in this draft, which means that they've definitely put a lot of energy into the concept of drafting a quarterback. Paul, did you have thoughts? And then, of course, Twitter questions if we have.
Yep. No particular thoughts other than, they found good value last year in the 20s with Trey White. You hope they can find good value again. And if they do make a move to trade up, God help them, that because of all the homework they've put in that we just discussed, that they will make a good decision. Mm-hmm. And then on Twitter questions, I posted yesterday to see if anyone had podcasting questions. We got some likes. We didn't get any extra questions, but then Frank chimed in today and we got a question. Not a question, just, Jonathan Fang had some thoughts on Alex Smith and Kirk Cousins. Said they are two capable QBs who have been somewhat slighted in their careers. And I think that's definitely a fair assessment. Of course, we covered this situation to death a few minutes ago, but it's worth pointing out, we talked about the championship games last weekend. The quarterbacks were Bortles, Keenum, Foles, and then some other guy. The other guy, we know who that is, and that's a premier guy. But, capable quarterback, maybe that's all the Bills really need. Maybe that's why, Kirk Cousins type will be just enough for this franchise as we get away from teams necessarily needing that perfect quarterback. So we'll see where that goes.
John is a Nats fan here in Washington, D.C. We know him through the baseballs. So happy to have his comments. This day in the history of the Bills, yesterday I had said yesterday was the anniversary of the day that Jim Kelly retired. But that's not today. And Paul has something else for us today.
I do have something else for us today. So I'd initially wanted to cheat and go back to the one I prepped for last time before we changed the day on it. But I thought that's cheating. That's not allowed. So I did check and see February 1. This was the day 17 years ago the Bills hired a new head coach by the name of Greg Williams. Boy, hindsight's 2020 on this. So here's I've compiled a lot of quotes and other stuff from that day and stuff leading up to the process. Some articles noting, seemingly out of nowhere, Tom Donahue had a candidate who seemed to fit the exact profile of what he wanted in a new coach. He wanted someone with an attention to detail, a man who was well prepared. Most important, he was looking for someone with an intimate knowledge of assistant coaching candidates. And Donahoe said, of all the people I interviewed then and most recently, this was the best candidate I ever interviewed. Enthusiasm, obsessiveness for details, a sense of humor, a belief in discipline, defense, accountability, teamwork. That's what Williams promised to deliver. And boy, if there's any lesson you can glean from this, you got to look at, interviews aren't everything. That's all I'm going to say. That's why I want to impress upon everyone. So it says another article notes William impressed Donahoe with a detailed research plan and strategy that he had been preparing since 1992. Mind you, 9 years prior to him actually getting a head coaching job that would help him land a head coaching job. That plan included a list of coaches whom he'd want on his staff, and he updated annually, grading the coaches' performances through each football season. I think Greg Williams is going to be special, said Donahoe. The two men first spoke last Wednesday, January 24th, by telephone, and they met 2 days later for an interview. It was clear for Donahoe, it's hard to imagine a coach who was better prepared for the interview portion of his search. His detailed planning, particularly with someone in a coaching staff, made him an exciting prospect. So those are some of the articles. Then, Williams is going to be offered a 3-year, $3 million contract. Sadly, as we know, that's all that would come out of it. Williams came in. He had Williams 350 winning percentage is the worst in team history for anyone who coached more than 32 games. So yeah, that's a little scary. But that has since been surpassed by Chan Gailey, I believe, since this article has been written off to check that. But he transitioned the defense from 3-4 to 4-3. They stepped back and went 3-13. Then they improved to 8-8 the next year. But then the last season, they ended up finishing 6-10, and that was it for Williams' tenure as a head coach. The defense did improve every year. Jerry Gray was retained upon Williams being shown the door in 2004. Williams did win a Super Bowl as the Saints defensive coordinator. He is still hanging around the league to this day, I believe. Where is he nowadays? That should have been the trivia question because I didn't check that out before I came in. It looks like he's with the Cleveland Browns. Oh, dear. Yeah, he's with the Cleveland Browns.
Again, so technically in the league.
He's kind of in the league. So here's the trivia question on this. And this is this one worked out well. Williams was not really considered the front runner for this job. The front runner was someone else who is now a head coach in the league. So here's some of the tidbits on this other gentleman. Ray Anderson, who represented this person, is the agent, told Sportsline.com that Donahoe said they were hiring Greg Williams. He said it was a brief phone call and one that didn't make us very happy. Two well-placed front office sources from NFL teams told the Buffalo News that his interview with President Tom Donahoe did not go well, and that was a problem. So he did not interview well, this person. This defensive mastermind dropped out of the mix, and it says he said that when they asked this person, now a head coach, if he was disappointed about what happened in Buffalo, he said he was disappointed because he was never given the opportunity to know what the position, why the position would be the best move for his family. He was never shown around Buffalo, never saw where he would be working, and never met potential coworkers, Ralph Wilson included. He didn't seem to be enthused. He was not enthused about the job for these reasons, and just more disappointed than anything. But he is still a head coach in this league. Greg Williams is not. Can you name this front runner for the Bills position in 2001 who did not get the job?
Bill Belichick.
Yes. Dead off.
Don't know how he let him off the hook.
I just like to remind everyone that Greg Williams is spelled with 3 G's.
Yes.
It is important to note that he is G-R-E-G-G.
It is a critical point.
It's how you knew he was terrible from the beginning.
Yes.
Never trust a 3G. Never trust a 3G Greg.
Well, and this is also why you should never trust any front office ever. Because that is like the most this is the greatest pick in the history of mankind. This is gonna go great. You guys are gonna remember this day as when we turn it all around. It's gonna work out fine. The interview was perfect. You guys have no idea. It's just such utter bull. Unbelievable. Yeah. That's why it's the kind of the curse of expertise. Like no one who has been in football for 40 years can go to the media and tell them, yeah, I mean, these guys are okay. I think it'll work, but who knows, right? it's impossible for them to say that. Like, it's just like it would be refreshing if they did, but no one, like, I can never imagine Sean McDermott going up there and being like, yeah, this John Butler guy who's coming in, he's a good guy. I know him from back in the day. He'll do fine. The other guy also did fine. But ultimately, none of this is really going to matter because it's the players who make the plays. Like, it's just that kind of humility is impossible. The answer to the trivia question, I'm always correct. So I will give you two possible correct answers because this one's a little harder. I'm going to say either Marvin Lewis or Gregory Goodwin Pincus.
Oh, yes, of course.
That's Gregory Goodwin Pincus, who is an American biologist and researcher.
Yeah.
Oh, he co-invented the oral contraceptive pill. I love this guy.
I just didn't like that he was a defensive coach. Again, I feel like that's all we hired.
The guy who came up with the pill, he's very good at playing defense.
Yeah,
understanding how to keep things from penetrating.
I believe he was a big proponent of the prevent defense.
Exactly. Right. Well, I mean, it was revolutionary compared to the pull-out defense or the rhythm defense.
The rhythm
one
defense
could say
I'm laughing for one could say I'm laughing for my diaphragm.
A lot of people would have thought that he couldn't coach because he had died in 1967. But
again, not the first time we've hired a dead man as a coach.
Yeah, that's true. They just hired John Butler this week.
He did hire a dead man.
Dr. Pincus was a phenomenal answer, but Scott's other answer was the correct one. It was, in fact, Marvin Lewis, now head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. And that was this day in Bills history. Bills hired Greg Williams with 3 Gs as head coach, February 1st, 2001.
That was wonderful. I like when Scott gets it right in 2 different ways. That always makes me happy. The only other thing here we go. This is it now. The last official act of the football season is upon us. We must pick our Super Bowl winners.
Oh, man.
I will not tell you the line. It doesn't matter. It's the Patriots by a few, not a ton, by a few. I will remind you the Patriots have never won a blowout Super Bowl, really. But they've won 6 of the 8 they've played in over the last 16 years.
Philly continues to be 0 for all of them?
Yeah, 0 for all of them. I think they're 0 for 3 or 0 for 2 now. They lost 1 with Jaws. They lost 1 against the Patriots. I don't know if they've been to another one. They did win an NFL championship in the 50s. They're like the Bills. They won right before the Super Bowl era, and that's it.
Right. That's why I like to say the Jets have never won a Super Bowl, because even though they beat the Colts and Johnny Unitas that year, it was still just called the AFL-NFL championship game up until the 5th or 6th iteration when they started calling it the Super Bowl.
Right. So, yeah, it was after the merger. Anyway, Patriots-Eagles. Patriots are the Patriots. The Eagles can do some things. Obviously, we'll all be rooting for the Eagles. Does anybody think they can do it? Or
they can do it. I mean, the Patriots are not unbeatable, and the Eagles have been slighted all throughout the playoff process, and have just done nothing but keep winning games. And they dominated a pretty solid Vikings team in the NFC Championship game. So they're capable, but capable and going to are 2 totally different things. And by the way, I should note that Doug Peterson is the coach, and he was an answer to a trivia question that it was his Bills trivia question way back in the day. But that's all I want to say, because I don't want to spoil it. But yeah, they have some Bills, right? They've got Nigel Bradham is on the roster, although he might be hurt. They've got Ronald Darby. They've got, I'm just going through the roster right now, Jay Ajayi, a Bills murderer, is on there.
Got a lot of former Badgers on the team here. We got Corey Clement, we got Bo Allen, got Chris Maragos, who was I believe is injured, but
Jason Peters, who's on IR, by the way, for the Buffalo Connection.
Can they do it? I mean, yeah. I mean, it's a football game. They could get lucky, and obviously there's a certain amount of credit that goes to a team that gets this far, even with the injuries they've cleared. With obviously the biggest injury to Wentz, of course. I mean, that's kind of the thing. Like, I would have trouble picking them in this game even if Wentz was healthy, and they're playing freaking Nick Foles. So no, they're not going to win. I'll see them hanging around, and then I see the Patriots do the old standard, score in the last 2 minutes, score to start off the next half, and the 3-point lead turns into a 13-point lead, and the Eagles then can't quite put the pedal to the metal, and I could see that the Pats maybe letting them sneak in a cover, but I don't think there's really much chance the Eagles win this game. I got the Pats by I'll put it at 34-24. I think it could get it. It won't get out of hand, but it's just I don't think it'll be
all right. I think it'll be a bit closer game. I think the last time these two teams played in a Super Bowl, the Pats won by 3, but that was deceiving because they were up by there was an onside, it was a touchdown, an onside kick that came at the end of the game for the Eagles there. I think the Eagles have done very well in the playoffs. I think the one downside of them winning is that when Frank and I go to Washington Nationals games, the Phillies fans may be more obnoxious if their football team has won a Super Bowl the prior season. But that said, I think you always have to look at who's the better team and who's been there before. And the Patriots have legitimately had every situation thrown at them, and they seemingly have won in almost all the occasions that matter. They only seem to lose to NFC East teams in the Super Bowl, so that's a plus. So maybe that'll bode in the Eagles' favor. And I think the Eagles are a good team. I think they keep this competitive because, as Frank noted, the Patriots don't really blow teams out of the Super Bowl. They've never really done it, not against the Rams, the Panthers, the Eagles, and whoever the heck else they've beaten that I've lost track of. I think they beat the Falcons last year, and then the Seahawks. So all of those were close games. I think this will be close. I think the Eagles defense will play well, and I think it's going to be 24-21 Patriots in this one.
Patriots, 1,000 to 999.
All right. I have the only one who has faith in the Eagles to keep it close.
Yeah, I have them 1,000 to 999.
Oh,
so
okay, that's true.
It's a 1-point game. At least it'll be exciting, I suppose. You will get sick of all this. I can't even get excited for the Super Bowl, to be honest. I do, and I say that as a way to ease the waters in case I suddenly on Saturday afternoon be like, fuck this, guys. I'm just gonna go take a nap or go for a walk.
I did that for a Patriots-Giants Super Bowl because I wasn't a big Giants fan at the time, but I then did watching the game, and boy, did I find out I was a much bigger Giants fan than I realized.
Yes, you can. Miracles can happen. No, I just it's not even that it's a foregone conclusion that the Patriots will win. I suppose that in a lot of ways I think that it is, but that's not why I don't want to watch it. I don't know. I was sick 3 Super Bowls ago with the Patriots, let alone last year and now this year. It's hard to get excited about the Eagles without Carson Wentz, although Foles has obviously done, and the team have done an admirable job throughout the playoffs to get there, especially in the game against in the championship game where they really sort of owned it. But I am going to be frustrated with Patriots Super Bowls until Bill Belichick and Tom Brady move on. And it's annoying because it's probably not going to happen next year either. My guess is that one of them might move on if you're lucky, but not both of them. And I don't know.
Yeah, other than them being sick of each other, why?
Right.
Why would you leave?
Why? It's just, I know, and they're probably sick of each other, but not sick of winning. And
it's almost like you played a video game. So you have to hope it's like a video game that they've played and won so many times it's no longer challenging for them. So the new challenge is to split up.
Well, they have to take it off rookie setting.
Right. They should take it off rookie setting and try it. Well, right, and then you end up and you're like, oh, I've got the MVP and the defensive MVP and the Super Bowl and a perfect season and 10 Pro Bowlers and I've won everything. And
it's not really. We were talking about the settings earlier with the injuries, turning injuries down to 0. The Pats need to take it off rookie mode when they're playing. When the other team just starts throwing you interceptions for no reason.
Right. They're like, oh, it's 4th and 57 and they're going to run it? Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Anyway. We'll see though. I'm obviously we'll watch some of it. I can't not watch some of it. And last year really, that's the other thing. Last year, with them so close to losing, with Atlanta owning the goddamn game and they couldn't finish it off, was just sort of like the I give up. That's the thing. I wish we could just tell them, like, we get it. You're the best. You've done it. Go away. Right? Like,
exactly. Like, what do we need to give you to stop?
Yep.
Right? You don't gain anything by winning another. We don't care. You've won. You're the best. Just let us play our game now.
The problem for like the Bills fans specifically, like AFC East fans in general, which I don't really always care about the Jets and the Dolphins fans per se, is that we're getting to the point now where now it's not ever really going to be possible in our lifetimes to ever be better than the Patriots were for this period of our lives. Like, they are so dominant to this point where we can't reasonably expect to go on a run that will match this.
Right.
Like,
you could win 3 Super Bowls in the next 7 years, and Patriots fans will be like, yeah.
That's a nice little, that's nice. That's cute.
That's a nice little run you had.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that would be, yeah. So now we're approaching that level where it's not even, again, like, it's just not.
It's like you're playing basketball with a 15-year-old and everybody else is 7. And it's just go away so us 7-year-olds can play a basketball game. And
it's like, I want to stop talking because I feel like there's some like jackass Patriots fans who's listening to this strictly for, like, he's listening to 45 minutes of us talking, and now he's just honing into this part, and he's having he's having palpitations at us, just, you know, getting over ourselves. Anyway,
I think you should be a little embarrassed of yourself if you're a Patriots fan.
Yeah, exactly. You need to get a life, sir.
Yeah.
If you listen to this Bills podcast for us to occasionally talk about how the Patriots are really good.
Time to move on. Find a new mountain to climb, Tom Brady.
Yeah, that's who it is. That's who it is. It's Tom Brady. We know you're listening.
Find a new sea to sail, Bill Belichick.
Just no one say anything about his kid. That's what we've learned. I don't know if you guys follow that story.
If you're a pissant and would like to email us, you can at bbillsmny or tweet us at bbillsmny on the Twitter. bbillsmny.wordpress.com is our WordPress page where we host our podcast, and facebook.com/bbillsmny. That's BBILLSMNY, where you can find us. You can Google us. You can Google Buffalo Bills Podcast. We are usually on the second page with all the really great podcasts. And we are happy to have done that this year in our 6th year of podding. You know, we got to the playoffs. We had a good year. Certainly the playing season ends next week. We will probably not rush back to the podcast microphones as is our want. But, you know, as the offseason goes on, we'll do some stuff like maybe interview fake Tom Brady. You know, a couple of years ago, we had a couple of fake quarterback interviews. Those were good. But we'll sort of space things out to coincide more with the NFL calendar. So we'll probably do one around the combine, and one around free agency, and one around the draft, and one because we're bored. You know, maybe we'll go back to our A Few Good Men.
Bring back the old favorites.
That went over well, and I wasn't sure how it would do. But we'll do
the wacky schedule too.
Right. We tend to be most interesting when the news is the least interesting.
Right.
That is.
The podcasts get fewer and further apart, but we would not really know Ilsa, the dominatrix, as well as we do.
Which Steven has seen. I remember Steven said he had seen the Ilsa film. So.
Well.
Yeah, it gets weird now.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we were so happy to have you on this podcast tonight, which ran a little long, but you know what? We talked about some interesting stuff. So you have a good night, everyone, and a good week, and enjoy the Super Bowl, and we will talk to you afterwards. Until then, my name is Frank.
I'm Scott.
I'm Paul.
Good night, everyone.